which has been presented to the natural peoples of the earth as God, quote unquote. The Hebrew Ibri means El, and Eloah means God, being synonymous. El and Eloah are singularly relative by fact and by definition. And that's a synopsis. It's more, but that's a synopsis to liberate anyone who don't understand what those 7 golden candlesticks are. And understand, so when you're dealing with, priesthood, reverends, bishops, imam, rabbi, high priest, masons, Illuminati, Knights Templar, bishopric, all of them know this. But if they teach the masses, then the masses ain't spooked and they don't need them anymore. Plus, if the masses start learning how to use the energies, the priesthood not only can't be taking their finance, they might find themselves hanging from the nearest light pole for all the past evils that they've done in the name of the Lord type stuff, when they really work for the Lords of London. Of course, the masses would find that out too. And then the secret treaty of Verona also, and they wouldn't be very happy with all these people to keep on saying Jesus God, and Allah, and Moses, Muhammad, and find out that they're criminals and thieves. Plus they're raping each babies. So once you kind of start figuring out this stuff that's really always been going on, these people won't be so enamored with these guys buying them some $60 million airplanes and stuff. With $5,000 suits and stuff like that, talking about, I'm going to give Jesus his head next week type stuff. So it's important that they not aware of these things. So this is, again, why, from a political perspective, they spend so much time promoting belief systems and no time teaching people the real science. They do not want people to learn, because then you don't need no priest, do you? So all of their military weapons will be turned into plowshares, wouldn't it? And all them big temples and mosques and synagogues will be turned into movie houses, or jams, sessions, stuff like that. Anyway, so 7 elements of jurisdiction. The fundamental principles still turn back down to operations in everyday society. So 7 elements of jurisdiction: an affirmative responsibility of any national or citizen, and this is going back to the divine constitutional bylaws, so you can understand these fundamental principles and how they're applied in everyday operations of governing bodies. All right? Is to adhere to and enforce the principles embodied within the national constitution of his or her national government, nation, state, or society at large. The this proposition embodies a primal rule in civilization and involves the duties and of citizenship. Constitutions are designed to maintain justice, peace, and harmony within a social order or body politic. Therefore, for derivatives in social duties and for general intersocial instructions, the advent of the universal-oriented science of government, that science is called civics. Nationhood, citizenship, nationality, public service, politics, economics, and organized government in general constitute the science and discipline called civics. Constitutions are set forth to designate authority to those who govern and to delegate limits of authority to each and every specific office or seat. The Constitution does not give rights to the nationals and citizens. Constitutions are in place to preserve the divine.
Yes, and even that's back to...
I would like to welcome you to House of Reawakening Minds, and our instructor for tonight is Grand Sheikh Taj Tarik.
Although the subject of jurisdiction is not limited to them, however, the intended preservation of the substantive rights of the people have been and are addressed with the established principles expressed within these articles. Supportive of these articles are the Bill of Rights, which is composed or comprised of 10 amendments. And these should be studied intently whenever any controversy arises concerning jurisdiction, quote unquote. Jurisdiction is the power to act, and more succinctly, the authority to do or to act in relationship to the limited authority assigned to a political seat, to a judgeship, to a court, to a trust, to any position in relationship to such exercises. The following relate to the secured rights of the people as embodied within the American Constitution. Whenever anyone is accused of a crime or charged with an offense, the following rules are to be known, preserved, followed, and acknowledged as they are firmly in accord with the supreme law of the land. Accused must be identified. The accused must be properly identified in such a fashion there is no room for mistaken identity. The individual must be singled out from all others, otherwise anyone could be subject to arrest and trial without benefit of wrong party defense. Almost always the means of identification is a person's proper name. But any means of identification is equally valid if said means differentiates the accused without doubt. There is no constitutionally valid requirement you must identify yourself. See Fourth Amendment. Also see Brown versus Texas, 443 U.S. 47, and Colander versus Lawson, 461 U.S. 352. Statute of offense must be clearly identified. The statute of offense must be identified by its proper or common name. A number is insufficient. Today, a citizen may stand in jeopardy of criminal sanctions for alleged violation of statutes, regulations, or even low-level bureaucratic orders. Example, Colorado National Monument Superintendent's orders regarding an unleashed dog or a dog defecating on a trail. If a number were to be deemed sufficient, government could bring new and different charges at any time by alleging clerical error, which is, of course, what they've been doing. For any act to be triable as an offense, it must be declared to be a crime. Keep that in mind. Charges must negate any exception forming part of the statutory definition of an offense. By affirmative non-applicability, in other words, any charge must affirmatively negate any exception found in the law. Offense or nature of charge must be intelligently described. The acts of alleged offense must be described in non-prejudicial language and detail so as to enable a person of average intelligence to understand nature of charges, to enable preparation of defense, the actual act or acts constituting the offense complained of. The charge must not be described by parroting the statute, not by language of the same. The naming of the acts of the offense described a specific offense, whereas the verbiage of a statute describes only a general class of offense. Facts must be stated. Conclusions cannot be considered in the determination of probable cause. Accuser must be positively identified. The accuser must be named. He, she, the accuser, may be an officer or a third party, but some positively identifiable person, human being, must accuse. Some certain person must take responsibility for the making of the accusation, not an agency or an institution. This is the only valid means by which a citizen may begin to face his accuser. Also, the injured party, corpus delicti, must make the accusation. Hearsay evidence may not be provided. Anyone else testifying that they heard that another party was injured does not qualify as direct evidence. 5. Accusation must be made under penalty of perjury. The accusation must be made under penalty of perjury. If perjury cannot reach the accuser, there is no accusation. Otherwise, anyone may accuse another falsely without risk. Accused must be accorded due process. To comply with the 5 elements above that are for the accusation to be made to be valid, the accused must be accorded due process. The accuser must have complied with law, procedure, and form in bringing the charge. This includes court-determined probable cause, summons, and notice of procedure. If lawful process may be abrogated in placing a citizen in jeopardy, then any means may be utilized to deprive a man of his freedom, and all dissent may be stifled by utilization of defective process. The essential elements of due process are notice and opportunity to defend. And it gives you an example in Simon versus Croft, 182 U.S. 427. One is not entitled to protection unless he has reasonable cause to apprehend danger from a direct answer. The mere assertion of a privilege does not immunize him. The court must determine whether his refusal is justified and may require that he is mistaken in his refusal. Hoffman versus United States, 341 U.S. 4079, that's 1951. The court must be competent jurisdiction, properly delegated authority, DOAO. 7. The court must be one of competent jurisdiction to have valid process. The tribunal must be a creature of its constitution, in accord with the law of its creation, i.e. Article 3 judge. Lacking any of the 7 elements or portions thereof, unless waived intentionally or unintentionally, all designed to ensure against further prosecution, double jeopardy, it is the defendant's duty to inform the court of facts alleged for determination of sufficiency to support conviction. Should one be obtained, otherwise there is no lawful notice, and charge must be dismissed for failure to state an offense. Without lawful notice, there is no personal jurisdiction, and all proceedings prior to filing of a proper trial document in compliance with the 7 elements are void. A lawful act is always legal, but many legal acts by government are often unlawful. Most bureaucrats lack elementary knowledge and incentive to comply with the mandates of constitutional due process. They will make mistakes. Numbers beyond count have been convicted without benefit of governmental adherence to these 7 elements. Today, informations are being filed and prosecuted by accepted practices rather than due process of law. Do not assume that attorneys or lawyers are working in the client's best interest. See Corpus Juris Secundum, Volume 7, Section 4, Attorney and Client. The attorney's first duty is to the courts and the public, not to the client. And wherever the duties of his client conflict with those he owes as an officer of the court in the administration of justice, the former must yield to the latter. Clients are also called wards of the court in regard to their relationship with attorney. Do not assume that court officers are competent or legitimate. These are just fundamentals, all right? These are fundamental rules that you should understand about constitutional principles. And when you understand certain principles, these can be expanded upon understanding, but when you understand certain fundamentals, you don't get tricked. And so we try to keep people clear on certain fundamentals of operations of government. And these can be taught to children at a very young age. They should be. And of course, when they're absent of that, that allows them to grow up under the deception that lawyers are actually working on their behalf, not knowing that lawyers perpetrate barratry, and they're officers of the private trading venue that they fakely call courts, which are not courts. They're human trafficking venues. And this is why it's important for people to know the distinction between the U.S. democracy platform that was set up in 1871, distinguished from the organic constitution. So when you go back to the divine constitution and bylaws presented to us by our illustrious prophet Noble Drawley, the more and more you study, the more and more you recognize why a lot of abuses take place today, because people don't know basic civics. And then you also understand why people in different organizations will pretend that they're working for the good of the people when they're actually working for themselves. Once you understand these fundamental principles, you can measure anybody by it, any tribunal by it, any court by it. You'll also know fundamental protocols, so you can break it down, study it, and you can see that most people walk into these venues not knowing what they're doing and being subject, mainly because they don't know the rules. And this is back to why we say, again, we present to people certain fundamentals. This can be expanded on, but they're just loose fundamentals. And if they would just learn the fundamentals, the people would be liberated from people who are operating in organizations who are screwing them, trying to own the birthright, trying to own your nationality, and trying to act like if you don't belong to their club, you can't be who you are. And then you go into the courtrooms of Europeans, misclassify you, and put you under the black codes, and deny you due process. So again, when you study the operations of these persons claiming to be government, you can see why Noble Raleigh said go back to the principles of your ancient mothers and fathers, because you'll certainly find this stuff out. And it's also why he said the half has not been told. If I told you everything, you go back to sleep. And he also warned you, and he said, be careful, Moors, some of your own brothers and sisters wearing turbans and feathers will be trying to put you back into slavery. And so again, your time is cool? So again, let's look at the last part of the letter from Pope Francis, to Barack H. Obama, who, and Pope Francis was assisted by Anna von Rees, who was acting, supporting, as assisting him to draft this for dispensation to the public. And this is the last few paragraphs. It says, we note that the current circumstances, we're talking about politics in North America. We note that the current circumstances in part the result of criminal acts engaged in 150 years ago, which resulted in the commercial enslavement of African Americans who were summarily claimed as chattels back in U.S. government debt in wake of the Civil War. Despite every act of abolition and declaration of prohibition against both peonage and slavery, it has been the policy of the U.S. government to enslave its citizens and to operate as a rogue state among the nations of the world. Instead of freeing African Americans, the sum total result of the Civil War was to vastly expand public sector ownership of slaves, giving rise to the outrageous and improper claims that have been made against the American states and the American state citizens that we are dealing with today. It is uniquely fitting that the Grand Army of the Republic is recalled to settle the circumstance in favor of the people. Attachment, civil orders, Anna Maria Wilhelmina, Anna Sophia Ritzinger, von Ritzenstein, von Letlow, Verbeck, private attorney in service to His Holiness Pope Francis. Documents related to the United States isn't a country, it's a corporation. The hidden Vatican Crown Empire. So, and this goes back to people understanding what we had on the board earlier, knowing the distinction between the Republic and the U.S. Democracy Corporation and the imposters. So you've been operating, not you, but you have been administered upon under false pretext since 1861. And this is where the Pope is talking about the criminality 150 years ago. And again, so when you're talking about anyone or any organization or any persons alleging or claiming to be trying to help these people in any format and don't tell them the truth of the history, that they're lying to them. And they're lying to them deliberately. And it's not accidental. So the mistreatment of the people is what? The undermining of the organic constitution. So when Raleigh says for us to help in the great missionary work to bring the people back in the constitutional fold of government, now here the Pope is backing it up. So that's 150 years ago. So now you see also, and that's from 2014. And then you see Raleigh has laid this foundation for the restoration, 102 years ago, going on 103rd year now. So as you can see, those who have not been enforcing the Constitution and the consequences that we've been suffering because of it and due to it is not accidental. And for people who pretend that they don't understand what Noble Raleigh is really standing for, they're lying. Particularly anybody in politics or anyone who's in any level of scholarship. So now here's the Pope himself, the God of this world, now telling you the truth himself. Of course, you already know he's under pressure. However, everything he's saying is backing up everything through our literature. So as you can see, but that's because everything's are collapsing now. So like Raleigh said, he said he's going to force the Europeans to tell you the truth. Now again, so while the Europeans are telling you some truths, you must take it with a grain of salt because they're still trying to steal your birthright. Because the deal with it is over for them. So they're not the Americans. You are. They're European colonists and their descendants who have been occupying your land, occupying you, stealing your birthright, and the U.S. democracy platform was set up to perfect the political operations by which these things, or how these things can be operatively done as smoothly as possible with the least resistance from the people. Therefore, this is why civics has not been taught to our people. This is also why basic third grade etymology has not been taught to them. And this is also why people in position of political power must always be in one of your secret societies. And this is why when they say any man that has any semblance of power in the Western Hemisphere must be a Mason. And as an example, you'll see even in the Nation of Islam, when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad present to some of the Moors who are under the Black Codes, he presents in the actual facts one of the lessons that says, what is a Mason? And he said, a Mason is a Muslim son. He didn't say Muslim son, he said Muslim son. So as soon as you do the research on that, it'll take you right to the Renaissance, 12th to the 16th century, where the Moors went into Europe, brought the Europeans out of darkness into marvelous light, and the Europeans have been ruling the world with Moorish science, and that's the source of its power. They just put it under different codes as Masonry. So once you understand that, you look at these things differently, not necessarily with some spooky mind. If you get the whole point, you start looking at the Kabbalistic nature, and then you'll understand why all Masons have Qurans. Understand that they're not looking at the way the masters are. And you'll understand why the so-called founding fathers all had Qurans. And then you understand when Obama was going to Egypt, which he cooked it and exposed that the American Constitution comes from Muslim law, he's sending you a signal, a code. It's not, but it's direct. But if you don't know history, you don't know that he's talking to you. So that just allows the fraud to continue without the heirs having not been told. They've been told. And of course, if you've been in any organized body, politic, where you've been studying constitutional principles, you would recognize the signals that Obama sent, as well as the signals that Rahm Emanuel, the Jew who left his administration a year before and told you about Nova Drale, told you what he did, told you the people are aboriginals of the land, and that they are a theocratic government, and then they signed the Rights of Indigenous People, set at Part 1, Section 5, for the people who declare their nationality. And again, and all civic groups and church groups were instructed on the international forum to dispense that information at all costs. So as you can see, they haven't been doing their job. So you can see the Manchurians ain't buying their bonds, and so it's they either fix it or collapse. And so when you understand the real politics, you can understand why Mr. Trump is creating havoc by making one statement and contradicting it the next day, and then making another statement and then contradicting it the next day. Is so they can try to justify openly exercising martial law, because nobody will buy the bonds, so they're going around threatening everybody. And most of the things that he said when he was running for office, because he really didn't expect to really get in office, because you already know it was set up for Hillary. But because United States Service Corporation was going bankrupt, they were forced to put Trump in order to try to fix things. Because if Hillary gotten in, they immediately went into nuclear war. and the position of the other nations have been, the tradition of the Kabbalistic actors has always been to demonize people and then invade them. So the thing would have happened, they would have automatically hit New York and all your major cities automatically. They wouldn't even give them a chance. This is why they put Trump in. You need to know the real politics. You know, because they couldn't afford her, not because they didn't want her there. Because the seat was already planned for her. But they also had to consider, and the other deal is they were going to drop a bomb on the Vatican as well as on the Rockefeller families in their underground tombs. So that's why certain things didn't take place. So if you really understand the real politics, that's why Trump's in. You know, and because they, not that they wanted him in, it's sort of like they have to play the cards that they're being dealt with right now. But again, you know, it still boils down, when it all boils down to, from a what you would call an etheric level. And I qualify the use of spiritual because spirit is breath. But what the masses connotatively take as spirituality, it's necessary for the heirs to spiritually awaken and to really start getting themselves together. Because if Rome don't kill them, nature's going to kill them. They're either going to fix this nigger problem once and for all, or they're going to be disappeared. You know, and if they understand how nature works, Rome ain't going to have to do it. You know, Rome may be used as a tool. You know, so when you're looking at the politics that's taking place, you kind of have to look at it in multiple levels of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and then look at them on multiple levels, because things that you may appear or accept as contrary to what you want may also be put in place to actually bring the cure. So don't make judgments, or just carefully examine things, and don't necessarily hold a lock position. Look in general, but don't necessarily hold a lock position, because it's easy to be to be deceived. So, and this is kind of reflected in Trump's activities. And then because you got to also look at Trump being a nice Templar. He's a made man at the same time from the stuff that the popes did to them in the 1300s. You know, they got some issues. You know what I mean? So Rome is divided against themselves too. And so this is a perfect time from a political reality for the Asiatics to really start pulling in all of their expenditures and start pooling their energies and start looking at realities and truth. We're in a position now that nature is more than willing and waiting to come to our aid, meaning that suffering does not have to continue lest we continue to go with the lies and the falsehood. The faster we're willing to dismantle all the false institutions, the faster nature will rescue us. The longer we take, the more we're going to suffer, but the deal is the suffering won't be so long only because nature is going to get rid of this stuff if we don't fix it. And if you have any insight into how nature works, you would be forewarned. Meaning that you, in spite of whatever you think, you'd be willing to fix this on your own, even though you may think that you're taking a loss, but you're not. Islam, give us Sister Mike.
Islam.
Mike Silver.
Islam, everyone.
Islam.
I just wanted to add on. I was, and he might even told everybody this too, but I was interviewing Dr. Phil Valentine the other day, and it just reminded me what you were just speaking of, political reality, and that we have to be in alignment and in nature, because we might miss out on stuff even.
Yeah.
For example, like this whole thing with Puerto Rico and the hurricane, and he was like, don't be distracted. They found gold there. Now,
and not just that. You got to remember, that's why you got to look at it two ways, because that's where the United States Service Corporation's main headquarters.
That's what I was getting.
That's why you got to look at it two ways.
Mm-hmm.
You know, But let's back up. While that is true, let's look at what we really know.
Right.
This is what we really know. In the territories of Lower Egypt, Kentucky, and Tennessee, which is really Lower Egypt. And when you look also in the Grand Canyon, what is known truthfully by archaeologists? They got veins of gold that you can literally take bulldozers and pick up gold that's really 80 and 90% pure. In boulders, more than would satisfy anything like that. It's their lack of controlling different areas that they're trying to get control of, which is why they put that bomb off of Haiti for them to get the gold contract when they refused it and they bombed Haiti and then told people it was an earthquake. When they took Japan's government employee savings and a multiple trillion value of yen in order to expand their fall. Likewise, also, what you already know, truth about diamonds, as an example, that diamonds are extremely plentiful. They control the issuance of them to the dumb public that don't know this earth for control purposes. So the point of it is, gold is plentiful. Gold is more useful to us, as we did in the ancient world, for ornaments, for jewelry, because it's nice and shiny and stuff. And while we did a lot of our cupolas, our buildings with gold and stuff like that, and people say, how could they do all this stuff and these old statues, and some of the old stuff is really thick gold plate and stuff like that, because it's plentiful. You know, so I look at the issue with Boykin as, that's why I gotta look at it two ways. They're starting more wars because it's the control issue of the resources. If they can get people to blindly miscalculate that even though the cosmological nature of the monetary system is based on cosmological, what we call precious metals, etc., it is a principle of fiat in honor, but fiat just the same, if you get the point. And so I would look at the Puerto Rico or the Boykin storms as also a countermeasure by also what we call light angels. So it's kind of hard to, that's why you can't exactly necessarily move on the idea of the mercy of preservation of the people who've allowed this to go on too. So therefore they're part of it, even though, not unlike us here in the north, where a lot of our suffering comes from divine recompense or rule of reciprocity, due to the fact that we did not object to Roman operations, but stayed silent and therefore complacent and complicit in those operations. So a lot of the suffering of the Asiatics of the North Gate is also called earned. Because the real deal is the Asiatics of the North are guilty of making Rome God while pretending they only feared Allah, Jesus, and stuff like that, when they fear their Europe, who they themselves call their great white father, and they won't buy or sell without the mark or the number of his name, while claiming to love Jesus, God, Allah, the Quran, the Bible, making salat and prayer. No, Rome is their God.
They're the biggest beneficiary.
And they fear him. So when you look at the response of how nature, not just what they're doing with what you call the advanced energy weapons, which are ancient, the particulate weapons, the laser technology they use, like in California, in Khalifa's land. So you kind of look at it, not just like land grabs and grabs for the gold, because that's more. The more and more I look at it, that is for the public. It's a dog and pony show for the public. Look beneath, because the deal of it is to control the estate. It is the resources. So look like this. Of what value is it to possess the gold when the issue is the land in which the gold is contained? Whether even if when the gold is brought up, that is moved upon the land. If they can keep your mind off the land herself, you know, and debating whether it's gold or silver coin, even when you have the gold operative, even in the ancient world, if you go to ancient Lemuria and ancient Sumer, etc., what they call ancient Sumer, even the fundamental tax operations or stuff like that, they still had what you call fiat systems, but they were fiat systems in honor. Only because of the, say, difficulty, say, with the weights of the precious metals. So when you look at Taino and the Arawak, Kari, lower parts, or what you call the south gates of Maxim, even when Columbus and them came for the Queens to steal the gold, remember one of the reasons they called Borican Puerto Rico in the first place was because of the multiple women's heads they cut off to steal the gold that was around them, because you didn't take them off like you do bracelets, because we would put the gold around their necks and their arms, and they even take a bath with it because you couldn't get it off unless you cut it off. You know, because that's dealing with the matriarchal principle. And the Constantinians, hiding under the name Christianity, would cut the women's heads off and steal the gold, and that's how Borican was called rich port, which is what Puerto Rico means. You know that's not Puerto Rico. I know that's not Puerto Rico. You know, so even when you look at from a metaphysical point of view, a lot of times when we spew out an explanation concerning the politics, we must be very careful that we're not also casting spells that give longevity to the dark priesthood. Just a thought. I mean, I'm thinking as I'm talking to you. And so I look at Borican with multiple eyes. And I already know, and you already know, that those were weather wars. They're not natural patterns. Right. All right, so they're not the natural pattern. And we know that the way the nature works, that she does not sit a storm over any particular place over 3 days. Right. You know what I mean? So you already know when it goes beyond the third day, and that would be dealing with the length. And then, the width or the strength of the storm. And then when you look at the weather patterns that are based on the hot and the warm currents of the waters in relationship to the atmosphere and the stratosphere by design and by balance. When that's thrown off, you kind of know it don't really get thrown off in a sense. And when you see elongated weather and patterns, you already know that they're using war. You know, so that's kind of how I look at it. And then also knowing that when the vicar said, when the vicar told them to stop preaching, and to restore the estates with no burden to the rightful heirs. Of course, you know, the BS continued. So that was indicative that the vicars had problems himself with the priesthood, if you get the point. So the gold issue to me is more a convenient current semi-awakening statement that still surface for me. I'm not dismissing someone's opinion.
No.
Because I see a couple levels
versus actuality.
Beyond that.
We have to be like, there's no way you can possibly understand nationality. There's no way you can possibly understand the way that there's no way you can possibly understand nationality. There's no way that you can possibly understand your political status or any of those types of things if you don't have some type of understanding of nature and you haven't observed. I was just agreeing with you and saying that there's so many things around us that there's levels to it. So on one level, what's going on? Yeah, that's just like the phase conscious version of it. But on some real like Ray Al estate, we're dealing with the land.
Yeah.
And we know that they don't have no land.
You're talking about the gold and silver, right? The gold and silver coin issue. Really, that's deep for novices. It ain't deep for scholars. Do you kind of understand where I'm coming from?
I got
it. You know, it's the estate.
Right. Yeah, the money's out of the estate.
Because, you know, it's sort of like when you look at it from a true political perspective, you take a Kabbalistic statement, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all other things will be added unto you.
Right.
Where the gold and silver is the additive column. The kingdom of heaven is the kingdom on earth. If you get the point. And so this is again why even over the years, as we've talked over the years, you know, why I've always spoken about the dangers of the UCCs, not understanding them, but how people get caught in application process to get them off the issue of estate, thinking that they're going to get some money when they're not allowed to have money, because even the system is predicated on fiat, private commercial paper belonging to the Jesuits. You know, so you cannot get any what you would call lasting value, or even a value that you can have control over, because even with the instrument movement, it must go through them in order to even be accepted as value, and they'll determine how much it can be moved even. Or even like say you have it, any of the private commercial paper in their account, you know, you go get 300 notes of energy and they start treating you like a criminal.
Yeah, right.
You know, you can't even move. You know, it used to be 10,000 notes, but now it's even less than that. You know, you be standing there at the counter talking about, I'm gonna buy a car and stuff. And you take over $5,000, and next thing you know, agents are walking up to you in the back, pinching you in the keisters, asking you what you're doing with what you think is your fiat. You know, so there's no real value there. That's still a controlling venue. But again, I don't want to belabor you with that, but that whole thing about the gold and silver coin, no, I'm not impressed. That's the first layer of the onion after the thin skin. You know, I say estate. Yeah, deal with the estate. Are any questions was there anyone that has anything to add to that?
I'd like to say something. I like that you mentioned the estate, because when people try to authenticate the birth certificate, they use the UCCs.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, how can you authenticate a certificate that was used to put you in debt by them to pay off their so-called debt.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
and the deal of this,
Against your
in harmony with what you're saying, the reality. Anything that's created in color remains in color. Anything that's created in a fraud remains in fraud. You cannot take any instrument that's created in a de facto venue and convert it to de jure. It does not happen. It must be rebutted, refused, and you must have what can be called an ongoing adverse claim of rebuttal and estoppel to oppose it, and a right of claim of reversion of the estate on which some value is predicated. If you enter into an agreement into the de facto feudal platform, it remains in feud. And what you notice when you're talking about the HMOs or the UCCs or the financial statements and now the authenticating of the birth certificate is the promise in a trade commercial to gain some kind of benefit of an unalienable right in a venue that itself is a liened venue. It's a contradiction, absolute. Though tempting to a person who think they're going to get a nice apple. Meaning they come to you with this big, golden, beautiful, red cherry, crystalline apple candy on a stick. Don't bite it.
Speaking about the UCCs, you know, because the birthright isn't commercial. If you were to, you know, want to discharge your debt,
yes,
read the rights of
exactly.
indigenous people, so you have the right to our land and resources back. That's how you discharge.
Yes,
Not
but
with a
they
commercial
can,
instrument.
right. And see, because even comprehending that when the United States Service Corporation crashed again in 25, you know, because even though, like, they'll manifest it in the congressional record of 28 to 33, it really crashed in 25. And then they re-registered another corporation in Florida and in New York, United States Service Corporation. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt, because he could not get funding from the rest of the world, he pledged all the birth certificates as bank bonds, which is a duplication of what was done right after the Civil War. So all Franklin Delano Roosevelt did was put more icing on the stale cake that Woodrow Wilson did in 1913. You know, and so they had no other resources. So this is where, again, they're converting our estate to back their private debt under the guise that we're getting a benefit. You know, so anyone who really understands the real history, that, in my honest, humble opinion, that falls for that has just been diverted and becomes a part of our problem. You know, and this is no different than in the story where Yahshua, when he said, you know, the traders always give up their birthright for a few pieces of silver. They don't even give them silver no more, they give them slugs. You know, and we're arguing, you know, gold and silver coins when it's the estate. And what I try to do, for me anyway, and I try to promote, while not disrespecting different people's opinion, they have a right to their opinion, is that when they can get your mind off the land and the estate, they got you. Because they're not going to give the masses who are held as vassals gold and silver coins. They're not. They're going to give them private commercial papers and control them, and then use the private commercial paper to steal your estate under the guise of buying, when you know and I know that the land is not for sale. You know, which is a contradiction, again, to the culture. Good. Give it hand it to her.
Islam, speaking of real estate, recently saw a documentary on, I think you and I talked about this, Ray Kroc, and it talked about the founder of McDonald's, I guess, but he actually took the, I guess, the recipe or something from somebody else and kind of beat him out of it, but they said it wasn't so much of having franchises or making hamburgers for him. It was all about real
It
estate.
was about the
Exactly.
Everything,
the
yeah,
trademark.
it was about real estate.
And franchise.
And so, he was putting franchises over it, but he wanted the land on which those various
Exactly.
franchises sat. And that was
Exactly.
more important than what we think, his
Exactly.
mission was, not to give everybody a burger.
And the guys he robbed, their idea was the idea of the business model itself.
Right. But Nailah, you have to add on the intellectual property, the real estate that comes with that, with the trademark, because it didn't matter if he had all those franchises. He had a so-called name, like we have the El,
Yeah.
the Bays, the Days, the Alis, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we had those titles, so like
Yes.
Well, in this particular documentary, though, they made
I'm
a
talking
point.
about that same documentary.
Yeah, they were talking about the fact it was about real estate.
Right.
Yeah.
But I was taking it to the next real estate,
Okay.
which is our once you have access, because we know we can't purchase the land and everything, like you have to have birthright. We have titles.
Again, now let me tell you something occurred too. As a matter of fact, I'm not gonna say any names because it's people's private business.
Right.
But in an area in New Jersey, there's a large body acreage of land, acres of land. And Moors, have that area. And one of the Moors brothers married a European. And he was not doing necessarily all the best things as a husband. And she sued for divorce. This is fact. And she went to court and was asking for substance and divorce. And the European judge said to the sister, and I know them personally, the magistrate denied the divorce to her, right? She had multiple grounds. And she was fussing and stuff like that, and the magistrate said to her, and he slammed the gavel, he said, "Shut up. Do you understand what you have in that name?" Divorce denied. He was telling the European woman, why do you think we put y'all out there first in the first place? Dummy. To get the land. Because the bears are entitled to the land.
Exactly.
Forget your emotions. That's what the magistrate was telling me. That's reality.
Yeah.
And some of the Moors was talking about that, and they was going into the emotional, personal aspects about it, missing the whole point.
Right. Missing the nature of it.
But that was a clear manifestation where the magistrate, trying to refocus her on why she is in that position. Forget your emotions.
We have an agenda here.
Exactly.
Right.
And the interesting thing, when you notice how many people that went over their head, they sit around talking, he always playing around, he doing this and that and the other. Just say, duh. It's bigger than this. That's what he's saying. But it's also an affirmation, of the missionary work. And this is why you broadly say we do not seek to marry into the pale-skinned nations of Europe, because they already know that they're there to stay your birthright. So that's a thing that when you were talking, it brought to my mind. And I don't mention them because some of them, some of y'all might know them. And that's their personal business, but at the same time, it's national business because of the implications. But I noticed that shortly after that, organizationally wise, and with the farm and the school, they built school, all that stuff closed down. However, that magistrate denied her a divorce.
And the same magistrate,
And
and the same
yeah.
magistrates in the same area denied us a lot of stuff too.
Oh yeah.
Because I sat in all of the courts. So
Yeah.
I just thought about that. We were like, no,
Yeah.
you don't have any jurisdiction, like
Yeah.
just all of
And because
them.
it ain't about that.
Right.
See, and this is about the arbitrary action of conversion. That's why, like, if people really understood the politics, and like we say, if it wasn't for the Manchurians stepping in, a lot more Asiatics who breathing today would not be breathing. They have no idea what the real politics are here. You know what I mean? Because the Manchurians put some brakes on them. And even then it's still negative, but these people have no idea what the real politics are. However, then you got to look at, again, from the etheric plane level. It's sort of like a sifting. So it's another reason why kind of like not to get too emotionally involved in it. I mean, don't lose your heart and don't lose your compassion. But don't get too emotionally involved because some things must be moved. If you understand, it's sort of like the Bible says, two will be in the field, one will be taken, the other will be left. If your right arm offend you, cut it off, which means if you understand the principle, do not enter your emotions. You got to study the multiple layers so that you can have some kind of semblance of proper navigation, because you can fall for the trap. Even though it looks obvious, it ain't always obvious. So, United States Service Corporation is at Puerto Rico. September 30th, they went bankrupt.
They did. They still owe them money.
And they went, and like you say, and on one level, I'm agreeing. So gold, they have, gold in Boycan. We all also know that. But we also know the gold that's in those mountains in Korea, which is why they talking trash with Korea. Because when they divided
here and
them,
found them in the Carolinas, like
because when England and the United States Corporation is a subdivision, so when they divided the peninsula, that was one of their plans. It's just that they didn't get it like they wanted with North Korea, so they weren't able to really they divided them. But they weren't able to really get in the mountains the way they wanted to, because they were after the gold there too, and also a lot of other unmined valuable minerals, except and there's a few rare minerals also that's in the area of the peninsula that they wanted. This is another reason why they're talking trash, and why they dropped that bomb on them recently too. Minor, and then. I think indirectly, and I wouldn't take it necessarily as true, but qualified where they talk about one of the underground facilities where 200 was found dead recently. Then look back a week or so more ago when they dropped that bomb over there, to imply for them to stop all nuclear tests and stuff like that. You can look at it from a lot of different ways. Also that goal. But I look at it more from the point that they're being blocked access to it. And that all the new operations of the nation states command a backing by gold, substance, or commodity, and that the fiat operations of the Jesuit order has no operative power, although it has reserve status as we speak.
right.
And so whereas the different nation states who have within their treasuries, over 50% of the reserve notes of the Jesuit operators, fearing collapse of their economies, whereas the Manchurian Brotherhood has promised remedy to them. But yet they're working this stuff out. So I look at that, and then I look at what appeared to be the real argument. 1800 is not the argument now. The argument then was, the abrogation of the Gold Clause for the overthrowing of the Republic for the purpose of building the political platform that exists now on the impostorship. However, in the real order, the gold and silver coin is irrelevant. It is the control of the estate. And if no one accepts their bonds, no matter what is backed by gold, silver, because they can't, because it ain't their stuff. But the deal of it is they can't maintain their armies. And if Rome can't maintain their armies, they can't maintain the theft. So if the Asiatic nations choke their capacity to use the fiat platform, then they can't go to and fro the earth-devouring nations, which is the key. Which is the control of the estates, the land and the estates. And through the process of color of operation of the barristers, again, continue to convert their private debt onto us under the fiat operations, which is also why the Pope says, where this, and this is what I look at this. And then you go here. Hold on, I want to see this part. Let me see. All right, so Mr. Obama is the president of a government services corporation. All right, so we already know that's the imposter political platform. So the Pope is exposing the imposter platform. Then he goes on to say, in so much as the officers operating the United States of America Incorporated and the United States, all caps, have contrived under conditions of fraud and somatic deceit to revenue the estates of the American states and living American state citizens to the foreign jurisdiction of the United States of America minor. That's the conversion. That's the conversion. They are found guilty of capital crimes, including acts of fraud and treason committed between 1933 and 1945. So that's Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Truman. Now this is the deal right here. No enforcement upon any American state or American state citizen is owed as a result of any act of any Congress operating as the sovereign government of the United States of America minor, nor as the board of directors or board of trustees of any incorporated entity whatsoever. So he's exposing that they're really not who they say they're simply board of directors for a private corporation company. Now, but this is key, and this is back to, authenticating birth certificates or UCCs or anything like that. Let's look at this. And keep this in mind that he's the vicar, as well as he's the head of all Roman Curia operatives, which are all corporate entities in the Western Hemisphere, all of them, members of the Roman Curia, right? So he says, look, all those estates, small case, and estates, all caps, erroneously believed to represent the American states and American states citizens, that's distinguished from U.S. citizens. So he's talking about the real people. And which were conveyed by fraud and legal deceit to the United States of America minor, and more recently to the city-state of the United Nations, are revenued without exception, to the geographically defined American states and the American state citizens, where they shall remain in perpetuity as assets belonging to the rightful and lawful beneficiaries. So he's making the distinction to the geographic Americans, which is us, distinguished from the United States Service Corporation personnel, which is the feudal lords and their descendants. And when you look at it, this is where the Europeans are having difficulty, who are starting sovereignty groups, claiming to be white Christian sovereigns or states, citizens. When you use the word citizen, you're saying in international venue, nation state, so you must name the nation. Citizen does not stand on its own. It's just a designation that puts you into the area of having an argument. Then you must step onto the treaty or constitution of the venue that you're trying to enforce. Name the fiduciaries and name the heirs. You mean that now you got to get specific. It's sort of like getting general, and then when you get into the controversy of the diversity, now you must be specific. So now when you go into, say, Article 3, Section 2 of the American Constitution, we're talking about any controversy between certain people of the same state or different states or foreign states, etc., the issue of diversity. And so now you're getting specific. So when people just throw the word citizen around without qualification, it don't stand in a controversy. You know, on a service conversation, you can talk it. But now when the issue of controversy, you must name the nation state. So now if you're saying state citizens, you must name the state, because the citizen relates to the state. Right. Now, so when you talk in states, you may be talking about the nation states of the orders of the territories under the Moroccan Empire, under European occupation, i.e. the United States. So the different states may be nations in that specifics, but then you must go to the state's constitution. Now, when you go into the divine constitutional bylaws, when you go into the warning by the prophet for the nations, and he's talking about under states governments, he's talking about the organic states constitutions, because they are simply nation-state territories in union, and their sovereignty under the federal operations in harmony with nature's law and nature's God. All of them jumped off that platform in order to enslave us. In doing so, they lost their birthright. But Noble Ali was talking about us being in proper person, being ourselves, and then if we're going to vote on the proper platform, it would be under states' government or states' constitutional principles, etc. And this is why it was necessary from a political perspective for the Europeans to set up an imposter platform of feudal lords. And this is what the U.S. democracy order absolutely is. And that's why it was so important for the Europeans to promote the 14th Amendment field marshal operations and then get pay or influence people amongst us under the name of Jesus, because people trusted him, and to march around and do the 14th Amendment thing, which would put us under the stock, making them think that they're U.S. citizens when we could never be a party to that, because we are the heirs to the land. Which is also why they don't show original Article of Amendment 13 Nobility Clause, as well as with its 20 sections, which demonstrates that people of African descent can never be citizens of the United States because it's a private corporation operating on your land, dummies. The whole dynamic process. And even with people amongst our own that keep promoting that civil rights crap, knowing that it takes them under as property stock to convert their debt. So the Pope himself is saying, all those estates, and then I'll read the next paragraph, and then you can analyze it as you please, but it makes it very clear. So all of those estates, small case and estates, erroneously believed to represent the American states and American state citizens, and which were conveyed by fraud and legal deceit to the United States of America Minor, and more recently to the city-state of the United Nations, are revenued without exception to the geographically defined American states and American state citizens, where they shall remain in perpetuity as assets belonging to the rightful and lawful beneficiaries. all legal fiction entities, however structured and named after the American states and American state citizens, are returned to them and their control, free and clear of any debt, promise, encumbrance, or obligation alleged against them as a result of false claims made in their behalf by officers of the United States of America, Incorporated, small case, and the United States, Incorporated, uppercase, or by any foreign officials operating in the United States of America, minor, or the United Nations city-state falsely claiming to quote-unquote represent them or have jurisdiction over them. So as you can see, here is the vicar and the head of all the corporate entities telling you that your estates are returned to you. So how is some subordinate franchise going to say that you had to jump through the UCCs or any other venue or authenticate a birth certificate that was converted under fraud, and that you have to apply to them to get some access to the estate that they've been controlling when it was converted or when it was returned to you. And then so when you look at that, even when you're dealing with the politicians or so-called people in the name of scholarship that claim to be metaphysical, that avoid exposing this to people, and a lot of times they will condemn the information because they've been selling packages to people, or meaning that they've been stealing the energy from the people, thinking that they can buy a right or convert a right. That's mom. Convert a right, and you can't convert a right, because it's unalienable. So you can't take an unalienable right and then put it in a commercial venue, because commerce means trade.
That's right.
And when unalienable rights cannot be sold or transferred, so that means there cannot be some lawful or legal process by which you're going to convert them. So therefore, the UCCs in that type of process and the birth certificate authentication always an offer in fraud to get you to seek a benefit in a fraudulent venue, so that in the future you have no right of claim in reparations. Because once you seek a benefit in the fraud, you can't sue later.
That's right.
Even if they never deliver. Because if they get your monograph on an instrument seeking to authenticate what you know is a fraud rather than rebutting it, because you thought you were going to get some cookies, that's one more air off the platform. Because in law, you cannot receive reparations in any future argument. They can show an instrument that you sought to authenticate what you know is a fraud, thinking that you're going to get 2 notes. And they say, well, they didn't give me my stuff yet. Of course, they never do. You know what I mean? Your argument's over. And that's how I see that. Because once you understand the state law and fundamental trust law, because you're dealing with a trust, you can, if you see a fraud, you don't try to get a piece of the action. Condemn the fraud. And be patient. If you get the point. And it's back to the seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all other things will be added unto you. And people keep looking for the additive offerings. I'll give you this. If you just sign here right here, authenticate this fraud, and you get reality. It ain't going to happen. But anyway, the Pope's telling you, it's all returned to you. And he's the vicar. He is the God of this earth. He owns all the corporate entities. So how is the corporate entity going to supersede the Pope, who's their head? So that's how you know it's a civil war going on. And then you understand why Trump is running around like a lunchbox, saying one thing one day, another thing the next day, and then another thing the next day, and people say, you Trump this and Trump, they shouldn't even be distracted.
Right.
Send him some petunia flowers and have a nice day. And not keep feeding into it, giving them more time. Let them go ahead and implode. But our people keep on giving them life by keeping on thinking that they're going to get a benefit from it. You don't get a benefit from Rome. You don't make a pact with Rome. You make a pact with Rome, you just made a pact with the demons. And that's what the authentication of the birth certificate. Make a pact with the devil and you get it. So don't complain. So again, like the prophet said, the divine warning by the prophet to the nations, Help me, my great missionary work, bring my people back into the constitutional fold of government, enforcing our Constitution for the United States of America. Once you go back and you'll find the distinction between the United States of America, the United States, the Constitution for the United States, Constitution of the United States. The Constitution of the United States is a private instrument by which the people natural cannot use because it belongs to the Franciscan Brotherhood. And that's why they removed the nobility clause, because all of their oligarchs are what? Lawyers and barristers, of which the organic Constitution disallows altogether. So the people thinking they're going to get a benefit find themselves screwed, and rightfully so. Excuse me for a minute, Mom, I'm finishing up class. Yes. All right, Mom. All right, Mom.
The world is watching and listening.
Yeah. Anyway, so
We're finished.
yeah. So anything, and this is the conclusion. Anything that's created in fraud remains in fraud. So any offer they make to anybody that think they're going to get a benefit from Rome is walking into a dark cave with a bunch of bats without a turtleneck sweater. You'll probably come out with a bunch of passion marks. And that's the real truth. Is there any other questions? Have we presented anything that you can use? Hopefully we have. All right. Thank you for coming out to House of Reawakening Minds. Thank Dr. Nailah for maintaining the platform.
Thank you, Dr. Nailah.
Thank you, Taj. Dr. Nailah.
Thank you for Abundance Child bringing the food and stuff like that.
That's right. Drop Squad Kitchen.
Go ahead, sister.
Also, we want to remind everybody that we now have more science civics classes every Friday. Next Friday. Second Fridays are always a brother of Abdullah Bey. So you want to be here next Friday. And Brother Taj will be back on the third Friday. And Sister Roz, I'm not. She's normally here on the fourth Fridays. I don't know who does and who does not celebrate that day of thanks, but it's the day after that. So we have to figure out if she's, most of us don't celebrate Thanksgiving, but we do celebrate family. So let's be real.
Anybody who has children need to come in on Dooley's Day.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's the time all of our children should be showing up for that class.
Absolutely. That'll be next Friday. That'll be next Friday, and it will be, So, we have somebody who donated vegetables, pies, and cakes over there. Please, apples, butternut squash. And all that stuff over there. Please, you cannot leave that stuff here because it will draw things here that will be in here when I'm not. You're not. Also, I made a pineapple upside down cake tonight. Y'all don't get a piece from me. Those are mine over there. You got to go over there and get your butternut squash.
I was gonna make some candy butternut squash.
Get them from over there. Go over there and get them. Get them right there. But I got a pineapple upside down cake. But if y'all don't buy a piece, we're going to eat it all up, so I'm really not worried.
The European keeps buying time. I was going to give them time. They keep on seeking a benefit from something. We need to step back and let it burn. But they keep on trying to get it. They keep trying to get benefit. And every time they do, things are saying which is why.
You made it yourself. This is the other way.
Bye, y'all.
You can bake it and then
That's it?
cut it. You just want to make sure you get the seeds out.
Finish.
You're having